I wanted her, but ended up kissing her father. My best friend must not catch me with her father. I had to blink twice, maybe 3 times when I saw it. $10,000. Just like that. I scrolled up, rereading the one-word text Mr. Richardson sent earlier. Sent. Not even a smiley face or an emoji, just cold hard business. You'd think he was transferring pocket change, not 10 grand. I tried to drown out the chatter of the campus around me. Students hustling to their next class, the constant drone of cars, a skateboarder whizzing past, but my brain was too focused on that number on my screen. It wasn't the first time he sent me money either. The last transfer? Over 100 grand. Paid my tuition without blinking, all because of a deal he wanted to make. There were strings attached to his money. A deal I told him I never agreed to. But he kept paying my bills for some reason. I quickly typed up the message. Thank you, sir, but I can't do it. Less than a minute later, his response came in. It's fine. Take care of yourself. That's all? How could he be so nonchalant? So confident? I was lost in my thoughts when something, or rather someone, crashed into my back, nearly knocking the phone out of my hand. Giddy up, cowboy! The familiar voice and the scent of coconut shampoo gave her away before I even saw her face. Annie, my best friend. She locked her arms around my shoulders and her legs wrapped around my waist as I steadied her with one hand, my phone somehow still secure in the other. Annie, seriously? I spun around, making her shriek with laughter. Couldn't help but grin. Her joy was contagious, a lightness I desperately needed after staring at the ridiculous amount of money. Put me down, you ogre, she giggled. When I finally set her down, she swayed a little, her dark hair falling over her face in a mess that still looked perfect. Annie was effortlessly beautiful. Her skin always glowing, green eyes sparkling like she was in on a joke the rest of the world didn't get. And then there was her smile, the same smile she inherited from her dad. Looking at her reminded me of her father, the man who kept sending me money. The man I had only met once prior to this mess. I forced myself to look away, stuffing my phone in my pocket before I started spiraling again. Where are you headed now? She asked, bouncing on her toes like she had caffeine running through her veins instead of blood. All done with classes, I said, trying to sound casual. Probably just gonna head back to the dorms. Or, she dragged out the word, tilting her head with that mischievous glint in her eyes, you could come over for dinner with me. My dad is insisting that I come home tonight. The mention of her dad made my stomach flip in a way that had nothing to do with hunger. Kent Richardson. Just thinking about him made my palms sweat. Man was, well, if I was being honest, he was intimidating as hell. He had his way of looking at you like he could see right through you, right into your soul. The first time I met him, he barely spoke a word, but he kept staring at me. And then there was his voice, deep and smooth like velvet, the kind that could lull you to sleep. Women probably threw themselves at him without a second thought, and I couldn't blame them. I don't know, Annie. I started already thinking of an excuse. Why don't you go with Cody? Her boyfriend, classic poster boy with an ego larger than heaven. But Annie cut me off with those damn puppy eyes. The ones that could convince anyone to do just about anything. Especially at me. After all, I had a little crush on her. Please, Lloyd. I sighed, knowing I was already losing this battle. Fine, I grumbled. But only if you promise to stop doing that thing with your eyes. She beamed, looping her arm through mine as she practically dragged me toward a parking lot. Deal. Now let's go before you change your mind. As we walked, I tried to steady my racing thoughts, telling myself it's just dinner. Just a meal at the Richardson house, with Kent probably seated at the head of the table, watching me. That evening. The Richardson mansion was on a different level altogether from my cramped dorm. Just waiting in the living room just felt like trespassing into a whole other universe. One where marble floors gleamed and gold accents on furniture screamed money. Loads of it. I shifted on the plush couch, trying not to sink too deep into the cushions. Heavenly smell wafted in from the kitchen, making my stomach growl embarrassingly loud. That chef back there was working magic, and all I had today was a cup of cheap instant noodles. I started tugging on the hem of my shirt, trying to distract myself from the gnawing hunger. It was hard, though. The money that Mr. Richardson said today was still sitting untouched in my account. Didn't spare a dime more than absolutely necessary, except for tuition. I was already terrified that I'd end up owing Mr. Richardson more than what I was already. If he ever got mad, or if he decided it wasn't worth the hassle. No, couldn't think about that. Penn State tuition wasn't something I could cough back up even if I tried. Footsteps on the stairs pulled me out of my thoughts. Annie's bubbly laughter echoed down the hall, and I straightened up, rubbing my sweaty palms on my jeans. When she came into view at the top of the staircase, she was practically skipping, her hair bouncing with each step. Annie Richardson was beautiful. Right behind her was her father, and as much as I tried to keep my eyes on her, they couldn't help but drift at him. He stood well over 6'4", broad at the shoulders, his tailored shirt fitting in a way that made him hard to look at anywhere else. His slightly graying hair was styled to perfection, not a single strand out of place. Then, when he turned to me with his cold green eyes, it felt like all the air in the room had grown thin. My heart began to pound, and I forgot to breathe. "Lloyd," he greeted, my name rolling off his tongue like fine whiskey. "Any allergies that you know about?" At that moment, I thanked Sister Leah for naming me. Usually, children abandon Catholic orphanages with struck-up biblical names like Bartholomew. No offense, but I wouldn't have rolled off Mr. Richardson's tongue quite as well as Lloyd did. Remember his question? My brain started working again. No, I mean, I can eat anything. No allergies." He nodded, and I swore there was a slight twitch at the corner of his lips, like he was amused by my sudden stammer. But before I could think too much about it, Annie tugged at his arm, pulling him toward the dining room. "Come on, Dad. Lloyd's starving. He probably hasn't eaten all day," she teased, and I felt my face heat up. She was spot on. Ken said nothing, but I caught the flicker of his eyes back to me, thoughtful, calculating even. And I wanted to curl up, fold in on myself, and disappear. But this wasn't a DC Comics movie. I trailed after them into the dining room, where a table for three was set up and waiting for us. Dinner was a blur of sensations. Rich, creamy pasta, tasty kicks from lemon chicken, and fresh-baked bread. None of which proved possible to resist. I ate like a man possessed as each bite filled the hollow of my stomach. I was starving. It wasn't until Annie nudged a glass of water in my direction that I realized that I was practically inhaling the food. "Pace yourself, Lloyd," she said with a laugh. "You're gonna choke." Where are my manners? I slowed down, feeling my face flush, but it was Ken's voice that actually made me freeze. "Not eating well at school?" he asked, and his voice was casual, but there was something in it that made the hairs on my back of my neck stand up. He's going to talk about the money he sent? What's Annie going to think of me? Is she going to think I'm her friend just because her father is sending me money? "He's got a sponsor, Daddy. Someone who keeps paying his bills," Annie interrupted, not giving me time to fabricate anything. "But he won't spend the money, and he also won't let me buy him food." Silly, isn't it? I liked Annie. I really did. She had a kind soul, but she also saw life through rose-colored glasses. I had a freaking crush on her. Spending her money would only make me look worse next to her blonde-haired boyfriend. My fork clattered against the plate as I half-choked on my last bite. "Annie," I started to say, but then my voice strangled into a squeak as Kent interjected. "If someone's paying your bills, why aren't you eating? Use the money." His words were soft, but the underlying command was clear. A wave of nausea rolled over me, all at once, the delicious meal I'd devoured seemed like a really bad idea. My stomach twisted, and I could barely stammer out. I'm fine. I'm not hungry anymore." I didn't feel so good. Annie's confused gaze bounced between us, completely unaware of the tension simmering just below the surface. "Daddy, don't be so serious. Lloyd's just being frugal. It's smart." But Kent didn't turn away from me. He saw right through my excuses, right into the fear that was bubbling up inside of me. I couldn't take it. The room felt too hot, too small, and I needed to get out of here. The next thing I knew, I was standing up and mumbling, "Thank you for the meal. I have to get back to my dorm." Annie appeared at my side in an instant, worry creasing her brow. You okay, Lloyd? You're really pale. Ken stopped eating and his cutlery landed on his plate with a loud clang. No need to leave. Are you okay? I'm fine. I just need to lie down for a moment. I managed, though I was far from it. My throat tightened as if all the food was trying to climb out of my throat. I felt terrible. Take him upstairs to get some rest. I'll call Dr. Young to take a look at him. Kent pushed his chair backwards and rose up, towering over me. I opened my mouth to refuse, but he shut me up with a stern gaze. Annie supported my arm, helping me upstairs. Usually I'd be happy to have this much body contact with her, but today wasn't that day. I leaned against and followed her upstairs. On the second flight of stairs, she suddenly slapped her forehead. Oh no! I just remembered my room is a total mess. Maids aren't allowed in there unless I ask for a cleanup. You know how it is. No, I didn't. I went straight from the orphanage to college dorms when I turned 18, so having maids sound like fiction. She bit her lip, then sighed. Okay, just rest in the room next to mine for 10 minutes, okay? I'll get them to clean up quick and come get you. Before I could protest, she was leading me into another room. Her words barely registered through the fog of nausea clouding my brain. Stumbling inside, I collapsed into the fragrant black sheets, too weak to care about anything other than the pain in my gut. The door clicked shut, and it took a moment before I realized where I was. This room was different from the rest of the mansion. Darker, more mature, with heavy drapes and leather furniture screaming masculinity. Shit. I turned my gaze up to the ceiling and it hit me like a freight train. This was Kent's bedroom. Panic! I tried to sit up, to call Annie back, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I felt too weak and nauseous, and the room spun around me like some twisted carnival ride. I needed to get out of here before Kent found me in his room for crying out loud, but as I forced myself to my feet and stumbled for the door, my vision tripled. I barely registered the sound of footsteps on the other side before swinging the door open. My nose crashed into a hard wall of muscle, and we both went down, tangled in a heap on the floor. The force of it knocked the breath out of me, and before I could begin to make sense about what happened, something soft pressed against my lips. My eyes flew open, and where I was met by Kent's wide green eyes. I should have turned down Annie's invite to dinner. Now, here I was, kissing her father. 1 week later. No, I whispered in my phone in an almost pleading tone. Annie's voice trickled through my phone speaker. Please, pretty please. I worked on my assignment when I was in the study, and I mistakenly packed a few of his documents in my binder. He needs it for a meeting today. I stared blankly at the white walls of my dorm. I wanted to use classes as an excuse, but Annie knew I already didn't have any today. So she called. Also, I had no reason to refuse. No, I actually had a pretty good reason to refuse. I kissed her father! The feel of his soft lips and stubble on my face flashed in my head, and I shook it away violently. Is there no other way? Can't you send it through an Uber? Nope. It's confidential. They've already signed, and he needs it for a meeting in his office in the next 30 minutes. Please? Defeated, I headed to her faculty to grab the documents and headed to Richardson Tech. In the lobby, I ignored the gazes of the professionally dressed staff and headed to the receptionist. Lloyd Williams. I'm here to see Mr. Richardson? The blonde at the desk smiled, her lipstick a perfect shade of intimidating red. Mr. Richardson is expecting you. Top floor. Just take the lift. She pointed me in the right direction with a manicured finger that looked like it could double as a weapon. Thanks, I mumbled and continued to the elevator. The elevator ride felt like it took an eternity, even though it was only a few seconds. And I stepped out into a hallway that was so perfectly clean and beautiful that I didn't want to breathe too hard in case I messed up the vibe. At the moment, the secretary's desk was empty, so I paused, indecisive about the next thing to do. Should I knock? I moved to the heavy wooden door at the end of the hallway, and after a moment's internal debate, knocked lightly. Come in, a smooth, deep voice called from within. Pushed the door open. Behind a large desk, Kent Richardson was sitting with his eyes strained on some papers in front of him. His gaze fell on my lips, and my brain betrayed me by flashing back to the last time I seen him so close. On mine. Mr. Richardson? I began, my voice catching on the last syllable. Kent, he corrected, not looking up from the papers. Excuse me? Call me Kent. This time he looked up and our eyes locked. Suddenly, I felt like I was the only person in the room. "Oh," I stammered, trying to ignore the way my stomach did a weird flip-flop under his gaze. "Kent." His eyelids fell shut. Then he let out a low groan that made the hairs on my back stand on end. What was that about? I held my ground awkwardly, not sure if I was supposed to sit or run out the door. "The documents?" he asked, eyebrow cocked, clearly waiting for me to get my act together. "Huh, right, yeah." I jostled forward, fishing the papers out of my bag. As I passed them over, our fingers brushed, and I swear to God, it sent a jolt straight to my gut. What's wrong with me? Is it because he looks like Annie? Just as he relieved me of the documents in my hand, the door behind me opened and a woman peeked in. "Your 3 o'clock is here." "Thanks, Rachel," Kent answered. The tone he used was very dismissive, but not unkind. She nodded and left as quick as she'd come. Guess that's my cue to leave as well. "I guess I'll be leaving then," I said, more to myself than to him as I turned to leave before I made a fool of myself with the weird butterflies on my stomach. Also, I had a shift in 2 hours. "Where are you off to?" Kent's voice stopped me in my tracks. I don't know if it was my illusion, but ever since the kiss, he cared more. "I have a shift at the restaurant by 5, I turned back, feeling like a kid caught sneaking out after curfew. Kent leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowed slightly. "I know you used to work there." "You used to?" My brain was flooded with confusion. "I still work there." He shook his head, checking the time on his silver watch. "No more of that. You look exhausted. Rest here a while. I'll come get you when I'm done with this meeting." It wasn't a suggestion, it was more of a command that left me off balance. He was an authoritarian and it unsettled me. "I'm not really tired," I argued, but the yawn that let itself free from my open lips said everything, making Ken's smile widen just a bit more. "No arguments. Sofa. Now." It seemed like it wasn't worth arguing with this dude, really, because he could buy and sell me with a snap of his fingers anyway. I settled on a sleek couch on the left. No sooner had my head hit the armrest, the week's stress caught up, and before I knew it, sleep whisked me away. 2 hours later. A gentle touch started on my chin, and then it traveled up to pat my head. I relaxed, letting out a satisfied groan. Then the scent of Dior Sauvage hit me, and my eyes flew open. My head wasn't on the couch armrest anymore. Nope, it was on something much softer, much more expensive, and it smelled good. Really good. Kent Richardson's lap. Fuck. That was one of the few times I had ever said it, but now seemed like the perfect time. I scrambled up, all but knocking Kent's arm away in the process. My face was probably red enough to put a fire truck to shame, and I couldn't bear to look at him. Kent chuckled, low and rumbling in a way that only served to make things a little bit worse. "Say that again," he teased. I opened my mouth and then closed it again, completely lost for words. "Are you hungry?" Kent asked, rising to his feet and straightening his ruffled suit courtesy of me. His cool, calm demeanor just made me feel more nervous. "No, I started to say, but my stomach growled deeply then. "Perfect. Just perfect." Amusement flickered into Kent's eyes. "Come on, let's get you something to eat." And I found myself half embarrassed and half captivated by the older man as I left the office with him. We were walking along side by side toward the elevator, and I wondered what the hell was happening to my life. 2 months ago, I was just a college student, struggling to get grades, having a part-time job, and having a crush on my best friend. But now I was virtually sleeping in the lap of one of the most powerful men in the city and following him to go out God knows where. I had to clarify again. I'm not going to spy on Annie. I don't like Cody either, but it doesn't feel right. If that's the reason why you're still paying my bills, please stop. That's not the reason. Kent turned around, patting my head as naturally as possible. I like taking care of you. Once again, my heart started beating crazily. I was barely aware of where my feet were taking me. Only that Kent's hand, warm and heavy, fell from his usual comforting pat on my head to rest on the nape of my neck. My skin buzzed where his fingers lightly pressed, tracing an invisible line that sent shivers down my spine. Truthfully, whatever this was, makes sense. Kent was Kent Richardson, Annie's father, but the way his fingers lingered just a second longer than necessary on my stomach, or how his thumb brushed on the base of my skull, sent my thoughts spiraling. Suddenly, I couldn't ignore the strange flip in my stomach, or the way my knees threatened to give out beneath me. I'd been feeling this way since the kiss a week ago. Holy crap, I liked him. The epiphany hit me like a ton of bricks. Was I losing it? Was this some kind of college student stress disorder where you start thinking crazy things about your best friend's incredibly attractive and possibly out-of-bounds dad? I had to know this feeling, this sudden explosion of insane curiosity, was real. Kent. My voice came out like a squeak, but I pushed through the embarrassment and tilted my head up to meet his gaze. Can I kiss you? The words hung between us, ridiculous and bold. Kent froze, his cold expression cracking. He took a half-step back, letting his hand fall away from my neck. That touch, now gone, felt like a cold spot on my skin that I immediately missed. Yes, but are you sure? His voice was low, the kind that could stop you in your tracks. All I heard was yes. Everything else in that hallway blurred. I leaned up, toes straining against the carpet, and pressed my lips to his. The world tilted on its axis. My heart went from beating out of control to flat out crashing through my ribcage. Kissing Kent was like touching a live wire. My whole body lit up, nerve endings sparking. Nothing else mattered except the fact that he was kissing me back. At first, he was gentle, cautious, letting me set the pace, but then, almost as if he couldn't help himself, he took over. His hands found my waist, fingers gripping just tight enough to make a head spin. I struggled to pull away, muttering incoherently. I feel obligated to return the money. Annie would kill me if she found out why you gave it to me in the first place. You didn't spy or help keep Cody away from her. She has nothing to be mad about. You can keep the money. I hated myself for being happy with the statement. I'd never had financial security in my entire life, and this was the closest I ever gotten to it. Was it so bad? And then I saw her. Annie. She stood at the end of the hallway, eyes wide, frozen in place like she'd stumbled onto a crime scene. Jerked back, my lips tingling with the loss of Kent's kiss. His hands fell away as we turned to face her, but the damage was done. The shock on her expression morphed into something far more dangerous. Anger. Betrayal. You. Annie's voice wavered, low and thick with emotion, before it rose to a shrill accusation. You're sleeping with my dad for money? Sleeping? I just kissed a man. The accusation hit like a slap. I blinked, but my head's still spinning, trying to process her words. No, it's not like that, I stammered, desperate to explain. Ken stepped forward, his voice firm but calm. Annie, keep your voice down. Don't tell me to stop, she shouted, eyes blazing as she turned her fury on him. You told me you weren't going to sponsor anyone when Lloyd lost his scholarship. I even pleaded with you. So she told him about me. Why did he try to manipulate it into a deal? And you. Annie pointed an accusing finger at me, her voice trembling with barely contained rage. Spying? Keeping Cody away? I knew you liked me, but this was crazy. You knew? My voice was small, weak. I wasn't heartbroken, rather I was embarrassed. You knew I liked you all along. Yes, I knew, she spat back, her voice dripping with disdain. I thought you were just some infatuated kid, harmless, but this? I didn't think you'd go after my dad. I didn't go after him. The kiss was hard to explain. I kissed him and I enjoyed every second of it. Annie, you don't understand. How could you? You've had everything handed to you. You've never experienced hunger or the despair of unpaid bills, so don't judge me. Annie snapped. So you couldn't have asked me for the money instead? I liked you. I didn't want to ask you for anything. Despite you pushing me over and constantly asking me to run the weirdest errands, I was at your beck and call because I actually liked you. Kent reached out, his hand hovering over my shoulder. Annie, he didn't betray you. He refused to, despite how much he needed the money. I just saw how much he was struggling when you introduced me to him, so I decided to sponsor him. I flinched away from Kent's touch, to tears spilling over. Don't. I choked out, taking a step back. You know, all of this happened because you're a control freak. You want to control things you like. Was I one of those things? You want to control everything. Annie can date whoever she wants. She's an adult. I can do as I please with my part-time job and my life. You can't control this. You can't control me just because you have money. Lloyd. Ken's voice softened, but I couldn't stand to hear it. Not now. Not when everything felt like it was falling apart. No! I shook my head, backing away even further. You can't control her either. And I don't need your money. I'll pay you back. Every cent. Annie hissed at both myself and her father. You disgust me. I'm sorry. My voice cracked as I turned and bolted down the hallway, not stopping until I was out of the building, out of their sight, and out of breath. It's all ruined. 1 month later. Customers trickled out of the restaurant, followed by the staff. I was in charge of lockup, so I returned to the staff room, changing out of my uniform. The two ladybirds kissing on the clock, the dim light reminded me of Kent. From the moment I realized my feelings for him, everything I saw reminded me of him. It was driving me crazy. But I was determined not to contact him or his daughter again. Every bone in my body ached. I'd been taking part-time job after part-time job, and the exam session was upon me. All of this was a desperate effort to repay what I had spent out of Kent's money, but all my work barely made a dent in my bills. In 2 weeks, exams would start, and I wouldn't have time for all my jobs. Why did things have to be so hard? I switched off all the lights and grabbed my bag. Swinging a key around my finger, I hummed while I locked up. The cool night air wrapped around me as I closed the doors. And just as I was done, my phone beeped with a message. It was probably an apology message from Annie. She sent many in the past month, but I just couldn't look at her the same. We were from different worlds. I'd never truly understand her, and she'd never truly understand my reasoning. But when I pulled out my phone, the message wasn't from Annie. It was from my bank. Kent Richardson just sent you $20,000. My blood pressure went through the roof. What in the actual hell? I had been busting my balls to pay him back, and now he's just throwing more money at me? I itched to return the money, but I didn't have his account number. My anger was now overflowing, and before I knew what was happening, I found myself mumbling to no one like some crazy man, pounding my feet on the pavement. I need to find him, get his account number, and be done with this shit. The street was silent, the kind of quiet that only comes at night. As I stormed down the street, headlights of an incoming car washed over me. Squinting against the brightness, I raised a hand to shield my eyes. The car rolled to a stop, and before I could think out what was happening, the door opened. And there he was. Kent Richardson, in all his devastatingly handsome glory, stepped out of the car. His eyes caught mine, and the action caused my stomach to flip over in a fashion that was both really annoying and undeniably thrilling. Looking for me? His voice was smooth, the kind that could make a person weak in the knees. And I was no exception, much as I hated to admit it. I opened my mouth to respond, but the words came out in a jumbled mess. Yes. I need your bank account number. You gotta stop sending me money. Kent's head tilted to the side, a thin smile playing on his lips as he closed the distance between us. Say that to my face. My heart leapt out of my chest, but I wasn't about to back down now. I stormed up to him, ready to tell him just how I felt. By the instant I closed the distance, he swept me in for a warm, utterly unexpected hug. It hit me then, right in the warmth of his arms, the stress, the confusion, the pure intensity of my feelings for him, a man so much older than me. It was all too much, and before I could help it, tears welled up in my eyes and spilled over. Kent's hand came up to gently pat my back, his voice soft. Just relax, Lloyd. Let me take care of you. It's all I ever wanted to do. I wanted to push him away, to insist that I wasn't some charity case. All I could muster was a strangled whisper. I feel like a user. What will people say? Kent let out a low chuckle, the kind that rumbled in his chest and made me feel like an idiot for worrying. They'll say I'm an old man robbing the cradle. A tiny laugh escaped my lips, even though my cheeks were still wet with tears. Annie, I said, the name coming out more like a plea than a statement. She misses you, you know. His hand slid up the nape of my neck, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. It'll take her some getting used to, but she'll be fine. I'll let her do whatever she wants with Cody. I wanted to say something about my jobs, about how hard I've been working to pay him back, but before I could get the words out, Kent laughed. A full, deep laugh that made me stop in my tracks. His eyes crinkled at the corners, and for a moment, all I could do was stare, completely mesmerized by how happy he looked. "What's so funny?" I asked, attempting not to sound whiny, but it came out like that anyways. "You," he replied, still smiling. "You're just so cute and innocent. It's what I've always liked about you." Heat surged to my face, and before I can think better of it, I was up on my toes, kissing him. It was a light, fleeting kiss, barely touching his lips, but 1,000 fireworks went off inside me. "This is my first time liking a man," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Kent's grin widened, making my stomach flip. "It will be the last." I rolled my eyes, smacking him lightly on the chest. "You're so damn controlling. You know that?" He feigned innocence, holding up my hands. "I'm working on it." I let out a long breath, looking at him, finally searching his eyes for something that I wasn't even sure of. "So, where does that leave us?" Kent's expression softened, and he reached out, his thumb brushing against my cheek. "It leaves us in a relationship. Any objections?" I facepalmed, shaking my head with a smile. "You're hopeless, you know that?" He chuckled, and before he could say anything else, I pulled him down for another kiss. We were unconventional, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid or worried. I knew that he would take care of everything. Ken tried his best to respect my independence, and I let him take care of me in ways I didn't even know I needed. Like we hoped, Cody and Annie broke up. He cheated on her, and she had to learn her lesson the hard way. Rebuilding our friendship was a weird work in progress, but it was fine. Having peace of mind enabled me to focus on my studies, and I regained my scholarship, but still, my phone often dinged with a message from my bank. "Kent Richardson just sent you $20,000. Question: do you desire to be taken care of too?"
I'm in love with my son's GF's gay dad. It was a shame that the guy who nearly ruined my already hectic day looked like he had walked straight out of those vivid dreams of mine that I'd rather not share. But finding the man attractive wasn't as insulting to my self-respect as was the fact that I wasn't really upset at him. If anything, I was nervous. More than I was 5 minutes ago. To look upset, I poked my soaked shirt. "What the?" "I am sorry," the guy was saying. "My daughter's a little too excited today." I was paying attention to her, and I didn't notice where I was going. Not that it justifies what I did, but I snapped my eyes shut and tried to forget how he looked. But just because one of my senses were forcefully shut did not mean my other senses were not working. In particular, my nose. I could smell his cologne from this distance. Would it be gay that I kind of wanted to nose along his collarbones to better understand the smell? It sounded a little gay in my head. "It's alright," I replied and opened my eyes when I felt a tiny presence beside me. It was Finn. Obviously it was Finn. In the background, I could hear a girly giggle. I just need to, do something about it. With my clean hand, I rubbed a hand over Finn's small head and marveled at how soft it felt under my fingers. "I can help," the guy offered and leaned down a little to grab a small hand. I found a little girl curiously peeking at me through her lashes. Although I could not really draw a resemblance between her and the guy, I understood she was his daughter. "I think our children know each other." I observed the little pokes Finn and the girl were throwing at each other, and the small giggles they kept sharing. I believe so. He is Finn. Ariel. He introduced his daughter first, before he introduced himself. And if it were not for the little edge in my eyebrow, I didn't think he would have remembered that little thing. "I'm David." He sounded a little bashful. "Blake," I replied and shook my left hand with his. The movement was a little awkward, but that didn't mean I didn't notice the small size difference in our hands. God, It was embarrassing how attracted I was to this guy. I wondered if he could sense it. I wondered if he had someone waiting for him at home. Blake, I can help you with that. I have a couple of spare shirts in my car. He pointed behind himself to what he probably believed was the parking lot, but the parking lot was on my left, and not behind him. He really acted like a fool. God, it was attractive. If you allow me? I do not think that's comfortable. No, it's not, but the kids, they can play together. The meeting's about to start. Maybe we can ask some parents to take care of them for a while? I looked down at the shirt and realized that I needed a change. I nodded with a sigh and directed Finn to stay right here and play with Ariel meanwhile. We hadn't even left the auditorium and I could already hear the familiar giggles over the loud chatter of other children and their parents. The walk to the parking lot was, well, awkward. It wasn't really a surprise to me because I often turned tongue-tied around the guys I found shamelessly attractive. In the last few months, and after everything, this was the first time I had allowed myself to feel attracted to another man. It made sense that I didn't know how the hell I was supposed to act in such close proximity. I always keep spare shirts with me, David said and unlocked his car. Ariel is a hyperactive child. Sometimes it's hard to keep up with her. I am assuming this has happened to you before? He gave a small laugh. It has. I bit my bottom lip and looked up at him. I wasn't sure how I was supposed to tell him to turn around. It was basic decency. As if understanding it all, he let out a small, "Oh," and turned around with a small flush up his cheeks. As I changed, I tried not to pay attention to the very details of his broad shoulders. God help me. All these soft feelings, however, changed for a few minutes when I sat in front of Finn's homeroom teacher and heard her narrating in a disappointing tone that Finn's grades weren't looking good. I turned to Finn. A look of fear crossed my face. Finn, you said you scored an A+ in math. I did, Finn replied and turned to his teacher. Math was A+. Oh, Finn, she said and stopped to look at the mark sheet before letting out a soft, "Oops, looks like I made a mistake. This is not Finn's mark sheet. It's Ariel's." She furiously apologized as I let out some breath. Here, this is Finn's mark sheet. And, well, it looked good. A few days later. Uncle? Finn said and I perked up. It was past his bedtime and I could already hear all of the whines he was sure to let out tomorrow morning. Finn, why are you still awake? I couldn't sleep, he replied and softly walked up to me. Can I sleep here tonight? I sighed and opened my arms to welcome him in. Bad dreams? He shook his head on my chest. I was thinking. I let out a small laugh. You were thinking? About what? Who's going to be your partner for the competition? On the conference day, Finn's homeroom teacher had clapped her hands to gather all of the parents' attention. In a sweet voice, she announced that the school was holding a small competition for the parents to create a sense of community among the parents and the students. It was a baking competition, and the kids were going to serve as the judges. Obviously, Finn wanted me to participate in something I had absolutely no knowledge about. But disappointing him was the last thing I wanted. I haven't thought of that, Finn. I don't know anyone. You can suggest it to me. Ariel's dad, was his answer. I immediately wished that I hadn't been so kind as to ask for some suggestions. It wasn't because I didn't want to meet David again, but I feared what I would become in front of him. However, it was true that I liked how relaxed I felt next to him. Suddenly, the burden I'd been carrying for the past few months didn't really feel like a burden at all whenever I was near him. He gave me more things to think about than the past tragedies both Finn and I had been through. And it all happened during a few hours of interactions with David. In the past few days, I often wondered how much different it would be if we interacted more. I will be able to meet Ariel too. Yeah, you're always thinking about yourself, kid. Finn giggled and hugged me tighter. I love you, my sweet uncle. Always confessing when you need something, huh? I rubbed his head and smiled when he giggled. Well, if this would make Finn happy, I was going to do it. The next day, David was sending off Ariel when I saw him the next morning. I hurriedly grabbed a giggling Finn's hand and nervously found my way to David. I was sure I was sweating. I only hoped that it did not hurt my pretty nice face. It would not be a good first impression. "Hi," I said as Finn and Ariel greeted each other. They were giggling so loudly that I almost couldn't hear David's soft, "Hey." "You're safe today. I have no coffee with me." I gave a small laugh and then suddenly remembered. "I'm sorry. I forgot to bring your shirt." "That's alright. I have a lot with me." He softly smiled. When Finn and Ariel left, I ran a nervous hand through my hair and looked up at him. And God, did he look majestic. I wondered where I should begin, but he beat me to it. "Hey, I was wondering if you'd like to pair with me. I'm sure the kids will probably put our names together." And there it was. I hadn't even needed to say it. I wanted to talk about that too. "How about we discuss it over a cup of coffee?" I looked down at my shirt and then at him. He gave a small laugh. "I promise, it was a one-time thing." "Prove it," I replied. Half an hour later, we were at a local cafe. When I said I wanted to drink black coffee, David turned to me with a surprised face. "You do not look like someone who drinks that." I checked myself. Sure, I didn't really look like your average tough guy, but looks rarely spoke the truth. "I like black coffee." "Of course you do," he replied and ordered one for himself too. "So," he said when we finally settled down, "have you thought of what we could bake?" "I don't know how to bake," I confessed. I sipped it on my black coffee and balked at how distasteful it tasted. Was black coffee always this bad? I wondered. I was hoping you knew baking. "I do." He leaned against his chair. "And I have a perfect idea." Sometime later. The competition was still 8 days away, but David came to the conclusion that it would be better if we started practicing as soon as possible. Nothing in our adult lives could make it sound important if not for Finn and Ariel. It was for their sake that we agreed to meet at my place on the following Saturday. Ariel and Finn immediately set the most important task for them: homework. David and I, well, focused on more adult-like behavior. "This is my room," I said and opened the door to my bedroom. "It's..." David began and stopped as he walked further into the room. He observed my room and stood in front of the same paintings I'd painted when I was a bit younger. Then he looked at the fairy lights hanging off the walls, and finally the succulents sitting on the windowsill. "Cozy," he finished. "It's cozy." "Thanks," I replied and pushed the fringes off my face. "Let's go." "The kitchen?" "I think it would be nice to cook something for the kids." "Yeah," he agreed, his eyes drifting over the photo frames hanging off the walls of my bedroom and the living room. But he didn't ask for anything, and although slightly disappointed, I was also glad. I wasn't sure if I wanted to discuss it so soon. He turned to me with a smile. "I think something light should work out." So we cooked some pasta for the kids and ourselves. As the kids ate their pasta and watched their cartoons, David and I settled quietly in the kitchen, each leaning against the wall or the counter. I couldn't deny the fact that it kind of looked like a familiar setting. The very thought of it brought warm feelings in me. It was like finally waking up to a warm morning. "Your cooking is really nice," David muttered. "Thanks. Most of it came from my late older sister, and some of it from my mom. Childhood habits sometimes serve you well. And, well, if that part of the conversation wasn't indicative enough of the awkwardness between us, I wasn't sure what would be. Finn and Ariel were still busy watching their favorite cartoon and eating their pasta when David brought up his marriage, or his previous marriage. Now that was an interesting turn in the conversation. Not only did it make the whole baking process easier, but I believed it also helped build trust between us. It was a win-win situation for me. Malt liked being at home. Or, well, at least he said he did. He then said that Malt was his first boyfriend and ex-husband. Malt and David had adopted Ariel 5 years back when she was still a little baby. They believed her arrival would only strengthen the love they shared. But it all fell apart.
Honestly, I blame myself as much as I blame him for it.
He was still kneading the dough, and I couldn't help but stand uselessly next to him. He said I could learn from it.
But, well, at that time we were kind of busy blaming each other for everything. So I didn't really come to this conclusion. Anyway, Malt liked playing house husband. But, obviously, it wasn't because he actually enjoyed it, but because he was insecure that he would not achieve as much as I did. He was afraid, and I didn't see it. They were younger, he said, and Malt just wouldn't speak up. So it wasn't a surprise when they finally fell apart. It was Malt who'd first filed for divorce. Soon after, he left the country. Then he returned and contested custody for Ariel. That was how the two ended up in joint custody. He was a good cook too. Things are cool between us now. So if he visits me someday, he should come over for dinner.
The offer was so absurd that I couldn't help but chuckle a little. There was absolutely nothing between David and me for him to invite me over for dinner with his ex-husband, of all people. I could only imagine the awkwardness. Does that mean you're, single? I wasn't sure where the question had come from, but it was out, and there was no way I could take it back.
If you're asking if I'm seeing someone, then no.
Although he was giving me a smile, I couldn't help but notice the slight pinch between his eyebrows. I wondered what it meant, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to push and prod there.
What about you?
He asked. My answer was quicker than I'd like it to be. Single. David smiled and returned to his dough.
Nice.
Nice, I agreed. A few days later. In the last few days, David and I had spent a good amount of time together. Obviously, we both said it was for the baking competition, but only an oblivious person wouldn't see the way I behaved around him. Was I taking advantage of this setting between us? Obviously I was. It helped that both Finn and Ariel had come to become good friends. It helped my case. A lot. One evening the following week, Finn's hands tried to drag me off the couch. No. I tried to resist his cute, pouty face. I am not moving. I pay rent. I'm supposed to enjoy it. Come with me to the park, he screamed with passion. God, sometimes I hated children. Not Finn, though. He was cute. Finn, let your uncle sleep. Uncle pays rent. Ariel's going to be at the park. Uncle David will be there. And that was all that I needed. I sat up on the couch and grabbed his small frame in my arms. Fine, let's go, Finn. I think your physical health is as important as your mental health. Haha! I knew it. Why was he suddenly talking like an adult? What did you know? You like Uncle David. Ariel said the same. I had half a mind to fall back on the couch and die right then and there. Kids were such a headache. They were impossible to get through. I am doing this for you. I am sure. Sometimes I wondered if my sister had returned as Finn. I am not going now. I was joking, Uncle Blake. Please, let's go. Well, who was I to deny Finn? David was sitting on a bench when Finn and I had finally reached the park. It was amazing to think that we lived so close to each other, yet had no idea about each other until that fateful conference. Finn found his friend, and I was forced to sit with David's familiar presence. Hi, I said. Oh, hi. He grabbed his notebook and made some space for me.
Fancy seeing you here.
I gave a small sigh. All because of Finn.
For me too. Ariel said you'd be here. I had to come.
That was, I thought to myself, TMI? I didn't want to know. Each admission from him brought a flush to my cheeks. I wasn't really sure how I was supposed to act next to him. When I didn't answer anything, it was because I couldn't think of any. He cleared his throat. "Can I ask you something, Blake?" This was easy. I nodded and folded my hands over my lap. "Sure. What is it?" "Finn isn't your kid, is he? I've heard him calling you uncle." Oh, hell. I didn't want to answer, so I didn't. I remained mum and stared ahead at a laughing Finn. Finn wasn't my kid, obviously. "You don't have to answer if you don't want to." David sounded a little comforting, looking worried as if he'd crossed a line. "We can discuss other things. Would you like to see what I've drawn?" And, well, that was easier to do. Over a year ago, my brother-in-law was diagnosed with cancer. He was at the second stage, so we still maintained hope that he'd come out just fine after his chemotherapy. On a very bad day, she had been driving them to the hospital for a scheduled checkup. She got distracted and hit an oncoming truck. She died right then and there. But my brother-in-law survived that horrible crash. But that didn't mean that he was free from cancer. Laden with guilt and grief, and with the fact that we didn't really have any close family members to fall back on, he decided to give me full parental rights for Finn. A few months later, he died. So, yes, Finn wasn't my kid. He was my sister's and brother-in-law's. But Finn and I had only recently come to terms with it. We were learning to live with it, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to share any of it with David yet. Or maybe I just wasn't ready. Because David sounded like a nice guy. He behaved like a nice guy. I knew things seemed easy with him, but I wasn't sure if I was ready for it all yet. So I kept my mouth shut and let David blabber like the bumbling fool he was. It was surprising that this habit of his was still the most attractive thing to me. Well, besides his handsome face. Late evening fell around us, and before we could leave, David tentatively grabbed my hand. Finn and Ariel were arguing over their homework, and it was loud. Even then, I felt at peace with his touch. It was nice being touched so kindly after so long. It was in these moments with David that I often realized I hadn't been very kind to myself in recent times, especially in the last few months. "I would like for us to meet again, Blake, if you'd like that," he said. There it was. Another warm confession. Or at least it seemed like that. "It's nice to get out of the house, talk to you." "I would like us to meet again too," I agreed. 2 days later. The competition was tomorrow, and David and I decided to give our baking skills one last try before the competition. Just like earlier times, Finn and Ariel were busy playing games or watching cartoons, and David and I were busy in the kitchen. I would admit, however, that his laughs made me less jittery. I only knew about baking as much as he taught me. Maybe I should bake something for Finn. "Maybe you can experiment," David agreed and handed me the bowl full of dough. I put it in the fridge. Now that we didn't really have anything to do except wait, he leaned against the counter and crossed his arms over his chest with a very thoughtful look on his face. I, for my part, stood on the other side a little awkwardly. I was picking on the skin of my fingertips, a nervous tic that I had gained a year ago in avoiding looking at him. Strangely, I could feel his eyes on me, and it was doing things to me. It felt nice to feel this warm after such a long time. I couldn't lie. It was addictive. "Blake, I wanted to tell you something," he said hesitantly. "Okay," I replied, not so very awkward. A tiny voice gasped, and I shut my eyes in pain. I kind of already knew what was coming. David chuckled along with me before we turned to the source of the noise. Finn was standing at the doorway, his color pencils in his hands. I could see the colorful lines along his arms. I would have to give him a proper bath after this.
Are you going to kiss now?
God darn it. My face reddened with shame when David laughed. Finn, I said. Watch your cartoon, Finn. Let us work. He giggled and looked genuinely happy, an expression that would have warmed if not for the current situation.
I will leave you, Uncle Blake.
Don't mind him, I said and grabbed dirty utensils sitting on the counter next to him. I will clean these as we wait. We won't have a lot of cleaning work left then. The question is, do you want to kiss me, Blake? And there it was. The silence I was learning to grow fond of. For a minute, everything around us was on mute, even though I was sure I could hear Finn and Ariel loudly giggling in the living room. I turned to him, my face red with shame. I haven't kissed anyone, I confessed. I was back to picking the skin at my fingertips. His smile dropped. Like ever? Like in recent times, I replied, which was true for the most part. The last fling that I had was with the flower shop owner around the corner. The guy was nice, but he demanded more than I was capable of giving him then. The most we did was kissing. When I realized I couldn't handle his personality anymore, I bailed out on him. Not my proudest moment, but he didn't look like he held it against me. So, yes, I hadn't shared a meaningful kiss with someone in a long time. Partially, it was because of the grief I was dealing with, and partially because I didn't really want to get attached. I had seen the devastated state of my brother-in-law when my sister passed away. He often used to say that he couldn't get the image of her dead body out of his mind. He sighed. We can return to work then? But I'd like to kiss you, I cut in. I wasn't sure if my game was still on, but it wouldn't hurt to try. Not if David wanted to try it too. I'm not sure if I kiss good, I began again, a little furrow between my brows. But I'd like to kiss you, David. If you'd like that, that is. He shrugged, but he was smiling. I've wanted to kiss you since the day I saw you. So the feelings are mutual, I assume. Very much so. And if we broke one of the glasses while passionately kissing in the kitchen for the next 5 minutes, the kids didn't need to know. The next day, Finn patted my hand before he was asked to sit on one of the judge's seats by his homeroom teacher. Do well, Uncle Blake. I ran a hand through his head and promised that I'd do my best. Across the room, I could see David doing the same with his daughter. But the best wishes didn't really work in our favor. Not a lot, at least. David and I were placed second in the competition. The first was an old grandparents couple who'd come to represent their grandkids. I told David I was sure they won only because of their age. He gave a small laugh but hushed me. When it was all over, we dragged mournful Finn and Ariel away from there, where they promised to give them their favorite ice creams. It seemed to do the trick. All in all, I believe the day had ended quite well. At least until David brought up his ex-husband. He insisted it was an important conversation that we needed to have. I decided it was also the best time to confess about my past and inform him about my past. I began first. Finn's my sister's son. That's why he calls me uncle. Is your sister doing badly? He asked and munched on his burger. I hadn't yet informed him about my sister's and her husband's death. They are, well, dead. Oh, he muttered. I'm so fucking sorry, Blake. It's fine. It happened a year ago, which also meant it wasn't fine. It has always been a difficult conversation for me. When I'd first met Finn's homeroom teacher after his parents' death, she had looked both sad and doubtful if I was capable of taking care of Finn in my state. I'd just started my first job, and although it paid well, I had little experience in handling a kid. If Finn wasn't my sister's kid, there was a good chance I would have lost him. Even now, CPS comes for thorough checking. It's a process, they say. I believe they just don't trust me, even though I've never given them any reason to doubt me. I really didn't know that. I'm sorry, Blake. What did you think? He looked a little embarrassed now. I thought you had Finn from a previous marriage, but when I heard him calling you uncle, I wasn't so sure anymore. I had my doubts, but I didn't think it was this bad. He turned a little to look through the window and at the small figure of Finn. How is he dealing with it? It was bad. Really, really bad then. I replied as honestly as I could. But Finn was already close to me when they died, so that made things a little easy. He was glad that he was going to live with me. I think it helped. He made a small wounded sound from the back of his throat. But Blake, you must know you're doing really well in raising him. He is the sweetest kid I have ever met, and his manners are so genteel. I almost always feel like he belongs to the aristocracy class. I gave a small laugh. You're flattering me. I am not. I'm being honest. He's a good kid. That he is, I agreed, although most of what he had learnt about mannerisms came from his parents. My late sister was very strict about this particular thing. You were saying something about Malt? And this was when the day turned bad. He confessed that although things between Malt and him had officially ended, they still slept together. In fact, the last time they slept together was 4 weeks ago, some 2 weeks before we first met. He promised that he hadn't slept with Malt since, but I couldn't shake the thought off my head that he could do that easily again. My goodbye to him was a lot better than I wanted it to, and I decided not to pick up his calls for the next few days. I believed he knew where I lived, and if he wanted to explain himself, he could easily do so. A few days later, Finn was at school when David came to my house. I had taken a day off from the office, even though it was entirely work from home, to wallow in self-pity and hurt. David was a nice guy, and I'd liked him from the first moment I'd seen him. So the very thought that I might have lost him to his ex-husband was more than upsetting. The very fact that he was still sleeping with his ex-husband even after so many years of divorce scared me. What were the chances that this would continue if something finally started between us? What if that guy returned and ruined everything before it actually started? I was scared enough. I wasn't sure I wanted to take that chance. But then David looked like a mess standing outside my door, and I wondered if I brought out the same kind of response from him that he did with me. If not, he wouldn't look like that. Blake, he said when I opened the door. Please talk to me. We had known each other for only 2 days or so weeks by now. He had no reason to look so distraught over something at such an early stage. But he looked, and that was flattering. His voice made me feel wanted, and it was a nice feeling after everything. I promise nothing's going on between Malt and me. We slept together because we weren't seeing anyone. In fact, I have told him about you, and we decided it would be best to stop it now that one of us has finally found someone. Blake. He sounded a little too desperate now. I will never hurt you. When was the last time you slept with him? 4 weeks ago, he answered. Weeks before I met you. But you guys will still have to meet? He gave me a resigned look. I cannot do anything about that, Blake. We share joint custody of Ariel. We will have to meet, though, obviously, it's only going to be about Ariel. Nothing else, I promise. And that was all I needed to hear. This was a huge step. This almost felt like gambling, but David and I had clicked instantly. He had seemed attractive to me the moment I first laid eyes on him, and it seemed to be the same case for him. So, until I took this chance, I wasn't ever going to know what it would end like. Hence, I took his hand in my own and jumped into his arms. He wrapped his free hand around my waist, and honestly, this was the first time I felt at home in almost an entire year. I really want to take this chance with you, Blake. I will do my best by you. And I agreed. Maybe it was time for me to finally step forward. Finn would love to hear about it. Ariel would too. We gave a small laugh to each other. But we didn't tell the kids until we were sure we were ready to take the first step into this relationship, which, sure, happened some weeks after that little meeting between us. In conclusion, I met Malt before my first official date with David. Malt was a nice guy, and David said that he had improved a lot in the last few years. Malt joked that the distance had done him some good. David and Malt still had Ariel's joint custody, and they often met to share Ariel's responsibility. In the next few weeks, David had grown close to Finn too. This not only helped us gain the kids' approval, but also made things easier for me. Now, the evenings at the park seemed like a routine. By the time the next parent-teacher conference was held, David and I arrived at the school together. In that time period, a lot had changed. The end.
I kissed my best friend's dad, and he kissed me back.
We raced to the school gate as soon as the bell rang, excited for the weekend. As usual, I was about to win the race until Grace pulled one of her tricks to distract me and won. "Loser gets to clean the dishes," she shouted, making me laugh and put a mocking face. "Whatever, cheater," I told her and followed her. Christmas holidays have officially started, and we have almost 2 weeks to stuff our mouth with the yummiest food and gain all the weight back, which we tried losing all summer. But this is our yearly routine, and it's the most fun part of the year. Grace and I have been best friends since childhood when her family shifted in our neighborhood nearly 17 years back, when I was just 3 years old. My mother tells me I ran to them and tried helping them arrange their furniture when they were moving in, and everyone still laughs at this, but ever since then, we have been pretty close. We started celebrating our own Christmas ritual when we were 5 called Bed and Breakfast, where we would have a sleepover watching movies, playing around the house, building a castle. Late night snacks and playing games and waking up next morning to some great breakfast cooked by our parents, either at my house or hers. Not just this, we have another tradition made just for me and Grace, where we tell each other our biggest secret every year. Just like I told her 2 years back that I'm gay, which she accepted openly, and to its exchange she told me that she kissed my brother, which shook me and made me cringe bad, but I couldn't get angry, as per the promise that we will not judge each other no matter what the secret is, and will stick together as it is. So I just laughed it off. We know everything about each other except this one little secret of mine that I have kept with me for the last few years, and it's going to be a secret that I will keep with me forever unless... I rushed to Grace's house after getting fresh at mine. The decorations have already started. Some didn't even take off their Halloween decorations even though it's been months. Unlike David, Grace's dad, has always been a big Christmas fan and starts preparing for it a week before, which I can already see now. I knocked on the door and David opened it. "Oh hey, Stev," he said, smiling, welcoming me to their house. I always loved how he called me Stev. "Hey David," I replied as I took a long gaze at him before entering the house. As expected, it looked spectacular with all the decorations and lights. "Grace is upstairs. Go up," he said, and I nodded, walking upstairs. "So what are we watching tonight?" I asked her as we planned a movie marathon this holiday. "Let me guess. On the count of 3, I said. 1, 2, 3. Twilight," we both shouted and laughed at the accuracy. "Ugh, it was so easy to guess. We have seen it 10 times though," I said. "Doesn't matter. Let today be the 11th time," she said, mocking me. "Kids, dinner's ready," I heard David say, and we rushed down already feeling hungry from all that smell of chicken pie. As I went down, I heard bell noises coming. I looked here and where to find the small bells hanging from the mistletoe. "You know, my mom always said you have to kiss the person you are standing with under the mistletoe," Grace said as she caught me staring at the mistletoe. "It's all bookish, Grace. No one does that in real life," I said, laughing. "It's not. My mom and dad used to do it every year before she passed away," she said, first in the angry tone which she turned into a sad one as she remembered her mother. "Jean is not around anymore. It's been 2 years since Jean passed away, and there is no day that Grace doesn't miss her. She was a sweet soul who always saw me as one of her children, only and was really playful around us, but she caught an irreversible disease which caused her to lose her life 2 years back." The mood was getting tense at the dining table, so David cleared his throat and started a conversation. "So, only 2 more months until senior year. Then what's the plan?" "Well, I'm looking for Brett College," I replied. "We are looking for Brett College," Grace said, stressing on we. Her and I made a plan of going to the same school and college, if possible, the same workplace as well. We pretty much love each other's company and have no plans of changing that. We were done with dinner. Grace picked some dishes and went to the kitchen. David and I started cleaning the rest of the place. I kept glancing at David. He looked really handsome and big in his white shirt that fits his bulky body perfectly. Even though he's nearly 45, no one can make that out because of his physique, which he has maintained really well. He caught me looking at him and asked, "Care for a drink?" "Yeah, sure, I will get the glasses," I said, feeling a bit shy, and walked in the kitchen to get the glasses and call Grace. We both happily came out of the kitchen, excited to drink something real. We're not regular drinkers, but it's fun to drink with David once in a while, especially when my parents have no idea about it, and David is helping me keep it that way, but only until I keep the promise of not drinking outside. We all sat in the living room, putting on Twilight to watch while David made our drinks. He came back with a tray and we all picked our glasses. Slowly, everyone got comfortable, and one glass turned to second to third. While we were on our third glass of wine, I noticed Grace had fallen asleep. I took the glass from her hands and got up to keep it away. Meanwhile, David turned the TV off. As I turned, I noticed both David and I were standing under the mistletoe. If it was a normal me, then I would have backed off, but alcohol gave me the confidence and rush, so I stood there. I could see David being tipsy as well, which was suiting my energy. "Is it true that I have to kiss under the mistletoe?" I asked him to take a step closer. "Yes, it is," he replied while standing still. "Then I would like to be a part of this tradition," I said as I pushed myself closer to him, until my lips met his and we shared a kiss. We both stood there for a few seconds, with our lips touching each other's, but not moving. A minute later, David moved back, making me move back as well. We just looked at each other and continued with our work as if nothing happened. "I will help Grace to bed," I said before leaving the hall. I picked Grace up and carried her to her bedroom, which we both were going to share tonight. It doesn't sound weird to anyone considering I'm gay and that we build our separate tents during Christmas to sleep in. I put her in her tent, which was full of her plushies, fairy lights, and some 10 lip balms, and moved towards mine, which I wanted to keep as simple as possible. But Grace managed to put some fairy lights on that as well. But thank God that she at least considered the color and chose a cool blue light. I slipped inside and laid there for a while, definitely not sleepy, but in the haze of alcohol, I couldn't take my mind off the kiss. It's the first time ever I was so close to David as a man, after liking him for nearly 5 years. I tried to stop myself from liking him, knowing it's wrong and that he had a wife back then, but it only became stronger when I overheard David and Jean's conversation, where David told her that he is bisexual and had a boyfriend before they got married. Jean took it sportingly, knowing what a great husband David is, but it made my stomach turn upside down as it gave me hope that there can be something between us, maybe even for a day. I don't know how long my thoughts kept me up, but as soon as I heard some faint noises coming from downstairs, I took a look at Grace, who was peacefully snoring, and pulled a cover over her properly. She immediately cuddled the blanket. After that, I slowly opened the door without making any noise. I wasn't that drunk by now. In fact, I was pretty normal, so I walked without trembling here and there. As I stepped down, I saw a faint figure under the dim lights in the hall. I stood on the stairs, realizing it's David, and kept watching him from afar. He was cleaning all the mess we had made over the night, probably for the morning breakfast plan. I looked at the clock, realizing it's 4 a.m., too early to clean, so I walked toward them. He noticed my sudden presence and flinched. "Oh, Stev, what are you doing this early?" he asked, but I questioned him back. "I heard some noises, so I came down to check. Are you cleaning so early in the morning?" I asked him. "Oh, well, same. I wasn't able to sleep either, and sorry for the noise," he said. "It's alright, I wasn't sleeping anyways. Here, let me help you clean," I said, and started picking up the unfinished fruit bowls. "It's alright, Stev. Try getting some sleep," he said. But I ignored it and continued cleaning. He gave up after a while and started cleaning the other side. This time I noticed him staring at me just like I did hours back. His glares give me butterflies, but I tried focusing on my work. Nearly half an hour went in cleaning, and we were good to go. I walked up to him to give him all the blankets which he saw, and immediately came to help me carry them. But again, this time we found ourselves under the amazing mistletoe that made my dream come true hours back. But before I could move away, David held my hands. "Stev, about the kiss. It was sudden, and maybe because of the alcohol, I cut him off before he could finish. Do you regret it, David?" I asked him. He took a while to answer, so I repeated myself again. "Do you regret it, David?" "Be honest," I said firmly, ready for any sort of answer. "No." To my surprise, he said no. "Then I'm going to do it again," I said, dropping the blankets off our hands and pulling him in for the kiss. His hands reached for my waist, pulling me closer, and our lips intertwined together. I could feel the heat between us. Neither of us stopped kissing. We pulled each other in closer and closer, even when we were running out of breath. I took a pause and rested my forehead on his. "You have no idea how long I waited for this," I told him, and felt his lips curved into a smile. "It's so sudden for me, but I'm loving every second of it," he said, making my heart race faster. "I can't stop kissing you, David," I said bluntly. "And I don't want us to stop, Stev," he said, pulling me into his kiss again. After continuing for a while, we decided to stop before it's too late. Go to sleep now, he said, patting my hair. You too, I told him. He playfully spanked me, and I ran upstairs smiling. I opened the door softly and checked on Grace, again, and just like I left her, she was fast asleep, snoring softly, while cuddling her blanket. I walked towards my tent and turned off the fairy lights. I thought, I won't be able to fall asleep, but I slept faster than ever with this taste around my lips. I woke up next morning with a tasty smell of waffles, but also something heavy on my body. I opened my eyes to realize it's Grace. She must have come a while back to wake me up, but ended up falling asleep. It's usually what happens. I pushed her legs off me and called her name out. Get up, Grace, I told, and heard tiny whimpers from her. After a while, I started tickling her, which led her to wake up immediately, and her morning was already full of laughter. We stopped as we heard the door knock. Breakfast is ready, guys, said David as he peeked his head inside a bit. Okay, Dad, coming, Grace said. David gave me a small glimpse and smiled, making me immediately smile, but I tried not to make it look suspicious. I got fresh. Usually we both have our brushes and other essentials at each other's place. I went down following the fresh smell. I'm so hungry, I said. I guess I'm still hungover from last night, said Grace, holding her head. Here, have some juice, David said, passing her the glass of fresh orange juice. He has always been a sweet, caring dad, which makes him 10 times more attractive. He served me hot waffles with some sausage and juice. We started eating and Grace started the conversation. Last night was so fun, but I don't remember what happened after we all drank, she said, and I heard David cough loudly, which made me smirk. I thought I would play around a bit. I pushed my legs toward his under the table, smoothly gliding it up and down his legs. I noticed his body getting tense. It's cute how he's double my age, yet his body reacts like this with just one touch. Nothing much. David and I just watched TV for a while after you slept, I said. Y'all watched Twilight without me? She screamed. No, chill. We just flipped through the channels and saw this one gay movie we found randomly, I said, making David raise his eyebrows. I noticed a small smile on his face. All of a sudden, he trapped my leg between his legs, making my heart flutter immediately. Ew, don't turn him gay, Steven. No offense, she said, laughing. Oh, trust me, it's the other way around, I said, and noticed a serious look on her face. Just kidding, I laughed it off, and she hit my arm slightly. We were all done with breakfast, the final thing for our bed and breakfast, although this time it was way more than that. So what plans for the evening? Grace asked. I'm already tired, Grace, I told her. Why, you lazy punk? You slept all night, she said. Sure I did, I scoffed, looking at David. Okay, I'm going home now. I need to take a nap. I'll text you about our plans later, I said, and bid my goodbye to both of them. I reached home and met my parents, who were busy talking to relatives about holidays. I said hi to them over video call and went straight to my home to take a nice shower followed by a nap. A few days went just like that, with me meeting Grace and hanging out either at my house or hers until Christmas was finally over. In the middle of us hanging out, I got some moments alone with David, which we both enjoyed, secretly kissing each other a few times and even us dancing along with Grace and holding each other without any suspicion of Grace. Now we just have a week's worth of holidays left, so we sat in my backyard and made a list of things we needed to do. We need to go to the beach, she said, and I wrote, fish hunt, I said. Why can't you call it fishing like normal people, she said, making an annoyed face. Because our ancestors have always hunt their food, I said, mocking her back. Okay, I need to buy some more sweaters before school opens again, she said, and I wrote it down. You're helping me paint my garage, I said. No way, I'm not ruining my skin or clothes painting your garage, she said. Well, if you say so, I guess Lucas and I will have to do it by ourselves, I said, knowing she won't say no now. Ugh, I guess I'll just come to support my best friend, she said, trying her best to make it sound casual. Yeah, more like best friend's brother, but okay, I replied back. Whatever, dork. We finished the list and went inside to eat some ice cream. Next morning, I woke up to something blowing a horn right on my face. Grace, stop, I shouted. Who let you in? I shouted again, angry as I was still sleepy. Someone who is not wasting his time sleeping like you, she replied, taunting me. Ugh, I will kill Lucas, I growled. You need to get up for that first, she said, blowing the horn again. It annoyed me, but it was also funny. I woke up, finally giving in. When I opened my eyes properly, I noticed Grace wearing an all-floral swimsuit, which made me realize it was our beach day. Oh, sorry, I forgot. I'll get ready now, I said, and rushed to my bathroom. I took my car keys and we left for the beach. It was not that crowded, so we had a lot of fun throwing each other in water and hitting each other with the wet sand. After hours of sitting there, it was getting dark, so we decided to pack and return home. I'm so tired, I'll probably take a nap as soon as I get home. Alright, sleepyhead, I said, and drove us back home. She got off immediately. Take your bags, I shouted from behind. Carry them for me, thanks, she said before running away. Ugh, this girl, I exclaimed before carrying all her stuff inside her house. As I stepped in, I noticed David sitting on a sofa watching football. Hey, Stev, he said in his raspy voice. Hey, David, I replied back. I have Grace's bags, I told him while showing the bags I was carrying. Oh, keep it anywhere. She already went up, he replied, and I kept them on the couch. Would you like to watch this match with me? He asked me, patting me on the space beside him, and I couldn't say no. I sat beside him feeling shy. I was sitting close enough to him but was distanced by the pillow between us, which he noticed me staring at and removed it immediately, causing our legs to touch. Even though we have kissed a few times, moments like this makes my heart flutter. We started watching the game and I heard him cheer for his favorite team, which happened to be my favorite as well. He looked like a kid cheering for his team. It was so cute in that moment. I held his face and kissed him. But to my surprise, that soft kiss turned into a heated moment. His hands reached down my waist and he pulled me deeper into the kiss. Should we take it to my room? He asked, in his raspy voice, breath shaking. I immediately nodded. He held my hand and we walked towards his room, kissing each other desperately. I was thankful that Grace was tired and probably taking a nap right now. As we reached his room, he pushed the door and things got even more heated between us. He sat on the edge of the bed with me on his lap. We continued kissing. His hands reached the hem of my shirt, which he was about to remove, until we heard a loud bang from the door opening and revealing Grace standing there in full shock. What the hell is going on? She screamed loudly. I got off David and fixed my clothes. Grace, I can explain, David said, understanding the severity. How could you? She looked at me and asked. Grace, please try to understand, I said, trying to make her understand. He's my dad, Steven. How could you do this to me? Were you that desperate to make out with a guy that you took my dad? She replied, and her harsh words started to hurt me. Before I could say something, David stepped in. Grace, it's enough. He didn't do anything, he said, making me look at him with nearly tears in my eyes, getting the feeling of support. He didn't do anything? That means it was all you, Dad? She asked, even more disappointingly. Dad, it's been only 2 years since Mom passed away. How could you do this to her? Do she and I mean anything to you anymore? She continued screaming. Grace, you're taking it the wrong way. Before I met your mother, I was already... Stop making excuses, Dad. I feel so ashamed right now. Were you keeping me in this house only for the insurance money Mom kept for me? She said it out of nowhere, and it was the harshest thing she has ever said, considering how sweet David is to her and was to her mother, Jean. Dad, honestly, I'm so disappointed in both of you. I can't even imagine. David, I cut Grace off as I noticed David falling on his knees while clenching on his chest tightly. Before he could say anything, his breath became heavy. Call 911, Grace. What's happening? She asked. Call 911. We don't have time. I screamed at her, and she ran downstairs to get the mobile. I kept holding him and rubbing his chest to ease the pain, but nothing seemed to work. I tried talking to him until an ambulance arrived to keep him awake. 20 minutes later, the ambulance arrived and we shifted him in. Grace and I sat next to him and kept holding his hand. I noticed it was getting awkward for Grace to see me like this, and I understood that the relationship of her father and daughter is stronger here, so I pushed myself back and let her take charge. We reached the hospital soon, and the doctor shifted him to the ICU. Grace and I stayed outside, waiting for some news to come. Meanwhile, I excused myself for a while. I needed a moment to understand all that happened, and how to face Grace now, since I can't leave her like this. And yes, I do owe her some explanation. So I decided to take a drink from the vending machine and went back to her. Here, half of this, I told her, while giving her a can of juice. She took it without causing any scene. I sat next to her, patiently waiting for her to say something. After 10 minutes of silence, she spoke. Why him, Stephen? She asked. Grace, I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but it's just how we got in a while. I replied. A while? Since when is it going on? She asked, getting serious. Since bed and breakfast night. He got drunk and then under the mistletoe, I told her the entire story. Oh my god, what have you guys done? My dad is straight. How can even... She said, putting her face in her palms. Grace, the truth is your dad is bi, and I've known this for a while. I overheard him telling your mom some years later, which kept me going on to like him, or else I would have stopped. I promise, but knowing he is bi gave me a little hope, which led to this. I explained everything to her. What? Why did I not know about this? She questioned me back. Maybe it wasn't required for them to let you know about it, but your mom took it really well, I told her. It's too much for me to take it while he's in the ICU, all because of me. I need some time, she said, and started sobbing. I didn't say anything further, but hugged her. It's been 2 days since he woke up. Doctor said it was a minor heart attack, but could have been serious. He also said it was important that he doesn't take any stress and takes good care of his physical and mental health. We'll make sure of it, Doctor. Thank you so much, I told him. In these 2 days, Grace was alone a lot of the time while I stayed around her to keep an eye on her and David at the same time. We heard a nurse saying that David is up now and we can meet him. Before I could say anything, I saw Grace running inside and hugging David. He hugged her back, and it was a lovely moment to witness, so I decided not to interrupt. I stayed by the door and heard Grace say, "I'm sorry, Dad. You're like this because of me," she said, sobbing. "No, dear, it has nothing to do with you. Maybe you were right," he continued. "No, Dad, I was wrong. I should have understood that it's time for us, especially me, to move on from Mom and allow you to do the same in any way you like. After all, you are an individual and you deserve to be happy. Let it be with anyone, even Steven," she said, making both of her eyes go widen. "What do you mean?" David asked. "In these 2 days, I understood that it's more important, Dad. It's how we all feel rather than what others think is right or wrong. So go ahead with your relationship with Steven. I'm sure Mom would be happy too," she replied, making both of us cry. I ran to them and hugged both of them. By now, all three of us were in tears, but also glad to have each other around. Conclusion. It's been a year since Steven and David came together. David's health became way better after all the love and care he was getting from everyone. Grace filled in for college and decided to move to another country while Steven couldn't get into college, but both Grace and Steven took it sporty. He applied for another college in the town, which also helped him stay near David and enjoy his new relationship, which was full of roller coasters. Both David and Steven would go visit Grace every weekend. Grace would come back during holidays. Their bed and breakfast tradition continued, and just like any other year, they made their holiday list and built their tents decorated with fairy lights for both of them, without caring about him being a boy. They happily celebrated the holidays and festivals together, and Grace watched the couple kiss under the mistletoe. The end.
I'm straight, but I'm stuck raising a baby with the hottest guy I've ever seen. I was 23, fresh out of college with a degree in data analytics. Standing at a mere 5'6", I was short according to society standards, but my blonde hair and piercing blue eyes made up for it in the dating market. I was straight, might I add, although most people seem to assume my sexuality based on my size. Very rude. All that was besides the point. So far, I was a normal guy. Why then was I standing in a lawyer's office with my 1-month-old nephew in my arms? The couple made you the sole custodian of Jeremy, the lawyer explained again. He probably thought my shocked expression was because I didn't hear him the first time. I did. But I'm young, I don't have a job, I'm not even married, and her husband hated me, I explained loudly, more to myself than the lawyer. My sister Claire loved me to bits, but her husband Peter was something else entirely. He was disgusted by me. His wife's seemingly gay younger brother. How the hell did he agree to me being the sole custodian? He probably didn't think he'd pass away in a tragic crash with his wife, leaving his only child to the feminine man he hated so much. In my defense, I was raised by my sister and I adopted her personality. So what if I was soft-spoken with extreme OCD? I wasn't gay. I looked down at Jeremy and tickled his chin. His blonde hair, green eyes, and button nose was the perfect combination of my sister and her husband. Of course, I loved him, but I couldn't raise him. I was unemployed, young, and inexperienced. "Sir, can't you reach out to Peter's family? Can't they take Jeremy?" I pleaded, unable to think of another solution. The lawyer sighed and shook his head while pushing a file over to me. Apparently, Peter had issues with his family. It's either you take him or he goes into the system. I'll call CPS now. As the lawyer's hand hovered over the phone, ready to make that dreaded call to CPS, panic gripped me like a vice. Sure, I might not have been the poster child for responsible adulthood, but I couldn't just toss Jeremy into the jaws of the adoption system. Not after what Claire and I endured growing up. Family sticks together, right? "Stop," I blurted out, my voice echoing off the walls of the lawyer's office. But I was not the only one shouting. The door burst open and a stranger strode in, his dark hair a stark contrast against his pale skin. Those piercing green eyes, so much like Peter's, bore into mine. Who the heck is this guy? Before I could react, he snatched Jeremy from my arms, his towering figure looming over me. I scrambled to regain my grip on the baby, but the sudden movement startled Jeremy and he erupted into a chorus of wails. The lawyer, unfazed by the chaos unfolding before him, addressed the intruder. Mr. Harry, you cannot simply take custody of the baby. You're not the legal custodian. What a snobbish name. Mr. Harry, in all his designer-suited glory, flashed a smug grin. He's all I have left of my little brother, and I'll keep him, even if I have to drag this case through every courtroom in California. I squared my shoulders, summoning whatever confidence I had left. Over my dead body, I declared, my voice trembling slightly, I won't let you take him. Mr. Harry's grin widened, a glint of challenge in his emerald eyes. Challenge accepted, he retorted. But I wasn't about to back down. Not when it came to Jeremy. He was the only family I had left, and I'd be damned if I let some pompous jerk waltz in and take him away. Well, wasn't this just peachy? Not only was I stuck with a baby I was wholly unprepared for, but now I'd gotten a rival for custody who looked like he stepped out of a Calvin Klein ad. Talk about adding insult to injury. I squared my shoulders, refusing to back down. Listen here, Mr. Armani. Kidnapping is illegal. I don't know how you met my lawyer, but you can't just snatch a baby. Who the hell are you? His uncle. Oh. Jeremy, bless his heart, picked that moment to let out another ear-splitting wail, as if to underscore the chaos of the situation. The lawyer rubbed his temples, no doubt regretting his career choices. While Mr. Harry looked like he's about 2 seconds away from blowing a gasket, I had my guesses based on the physical similarities, but it was confirmed now. This hot stranger was Peter's biological brother. The lawyer intervened, passing Jeremy back into my arms where he quickly quieted down. You've agreed to keep him, right? His question was backed up with an aggressive wink that spoke volumes. Unable to refuse, I glanced from the lawyer to Harry and the baby before grunting, Yes, I'll keep him. Bloody hell. A week later. Maybe I should have let Harry take Jeremy. His loud wails filled my apartment, and I could see my sleep-deprived reflection in the baby bottle on the sink. All the baby did was eat, sleep, cry, and repeat. With sluggish steps, I went to pick him up from his makeshift cot. Baby, please stop crying. Unrelenting, Jeremy continued to wail. His diaper was fresh and his belly protruded as evidence of his last bottle. I'd surfed several websites in search of ways to calm him down, but I couldn't find anything. The one thing that worked a little was his pacifier, a blue Captain America pacifier that I gifted Claire during her baby shower. I placed it in Jeremy's mouth and waited for him to calm down. With my free hand, I put necessary items into the baby bag. I had finally decided to go to Claire's house. Avoiding it wasn't a viable option anymore. My house wasn't ready for a baby, but her house was. I definitely couldn't bring myself to live there, but I could bring some stuff over to my place. Jeremy needed a cot and baby items. I had to do this for him. Somehow, I got both of us out of the door in less than 30 minutes. I caught sight of a stack of boxes in front of the unit opposite of mine. Someone is finally moving in. My new neighbor was the least of my problems. Driving with a fussy baby tested the limits of my patience, and to make matters worse, we'd arrived. I parked in front of the quaint blue house surrounded by a white picket fence. Victor? I gasped, nearly jumping out of my seat as a woman's voice cut through the noise. Oh my God. It was Claire and Peter's neighbor, a middle-aged woman with salt and pepper hair. Dear, I didn't mean to startle you. I just wanted to offer my condolences. A tiny tear streaked its way down my cheek. Stop crying, I thought to myself. Apparently Jeremy didn't get the memo either, and he joined me in my tear fest. The neighbor pulled back with an awkward smile. Well then, have a nice day, and tell the gentleman in there to keep it down. Which gentleman? My eyes drifted to the wide open front door. Someone was in the house. I ran out in a panic, but stopped at the doorway. The baby was still in the car. I waddled back to the car and pulled him out. I'm sorry, baby. Uncle Victor isn't used to taking you around yet. I continued my dash into the house, my heart pounding against my ribs like it was trying to escape the mess that was my life. Pictures of Claire and Peter adorned the walls, a painful reminder of what I'd lost. Baby items littered every corner. My eyes scanned the room until they landed on Peter's office. That's where the noise was coming from. With tentative steps, I peeked into the office. Inside, loud music and a strange sight welcomed me. There he was, Harry, looking more disheveled than a stray cat caught in a thunderstorm. Harry, what are you doing here? I blurted out, my voice straining over the rock music. He turned to face me, his stubble face a testament to the chaos that we were going through. Victor, he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. I had to come. I couldn't stay away. I felt a pang of sympathy for him. After all, we were in this mess together, mourning the loss of our loved ones. Without a word, he crossed the room and reached out for Jeremy, who was babbling in my arms. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of his intentions, but eventually relented and handed over my nephew. Harry cradled Jeremy close to his chest, his eyes welling up with tears. It was a sight that tugged at my heartstrings, reminding me that beneath his tough exterior, he was just as broken as I was. I reached up and gently patted his back, offering whatever comfort I could. I'm not actually crying. I got sand in my eye, he protested. Of course, I patted his back, straining to reach the right height. Darn long legs. This moment was interrupted by a loud growling sound from Harry. Did you have breakfast? No, he shrugged, placing a kiss on Jeremy's forehead. Without a second thought, I led him downstairs to the kitchen where I rummaged through the freezer for something to eat. Frozen rice. Typical Claire. I chuckled at the memory. Want to hear a fun fact? I asked, tossing the rice into the microwave. Harry struggled to position Jeremy now that he was sitting, but he still replied, Yeah, hit me. I stretched my hands over the tabletop to help. One hand below his bum, the other behind his neck. You're already a pro, he smiled. My cheeks warmed with a blush. I'm not a pro, I just watched a lot of YouTube for help. What's the fun fact you wanted to tell me? Oh, that! I patted my head at my forgetfulness. Do you know why there are frozen rice baggies in the freezer? Harry shook his head. No, why? Claire hated cooking from scratch. So, she would just microwave the rice. I explained this quirk to Harry, and we both laughed. He pointed to the fabric covering on the pot handles. Peter got burnt by a pot handle as a child and has lived in perpetual fear ever since. It was a strange detail, but it brought a smile to my face nonetheless. We settled into a comfortable silence, and I whipped up a plate of egg-fried rice. Jeremy was placed in his day cot, and Harry devoured his food with gusto, offering nods of approval between bites with a pat on my head. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of annoyance at his casual pats. Hey, watch it, I muttered, swatting his hand away. He grinned sheepishly. Sorry, Victor, it's just, you're the perfect height for head patting. I scowled, but couldn't suppress the laughter bubbling up inside me. Harry was a strange mix of irritating and endearing, much like Peter had been. Once we finished eating, I gathered up Jeremy's things, ready to make a hasty exit. But, as I turned to leave, Harry stopped me with a mysterious smile. I'll see you around, Victor, he said cryptically, refusing to meet my gaze. I furrowed my brow in confusion, but before I could question him further, he pulled me into a tight hug. It was a brief moment of connection. I held him close. The next day, I dragged a hand through my hair and swiped the last t-shirt from the pile of clean clothes on my bed, taking it to the closet for a hanger. Then, I carted the empty basket to the laundry room and headed for the kitchen. The dishes were done, the fridge stocked thanks to the last bit of my savings, the entire house was clean, and Jeremy seemed to approve. For the first time in weeks, things felt almost perfect. Not a huge feat. The actual accomplishment had been me sending out job applications. Mondays were a quiet day, so I doubted there would be much of a response until Wednesday, especially at the end of October, when companies rarely hired new staff. Still, my fingers itched to check my mail simply for the distraction, simply to take my mind off the clock. The endless ding of the elevator opening and closing reminded me of my new neighbor. It was moving day. I pulled on a pair of shorts that ended just around mid-thigh. "Let's go greet our new neighbor," I kissed Jeremy as he squirmed, then shifted him to the cradle of my arm. With one hand, I picked up a pie I'd gotten from the store and walked out the door. Outside, the pie slipped from my fingers, plopping to the ground. "Ugh," I groaned. "I'll get it," a deep, rugged voice sounded from behind me. Then came the thuds of boots on the floor. I stood, ready to smile and introduce myself, but the second I spotted the man walking my way, my brain scrambled. "Harry?" "At your service," he retorted with a cocky smile. "I'm guessing this pie is for me?" I looked at the open door of the unit next to mine, to Harry, who leaned down to place a kiss on Jeremy's forehead. His scent washed over me, cedarwood and pine. I curled my toes, holding back the warm feeling in my belly. Why was I acting like this? "So, you're my new neighbor," I interrogated, realizing that he came with hidden intentions. "You're right." "I will not give up custody of Jeremy," I fired indignantly, cradling Jeremy to my chest. "Oh, I don't want that anymore," Harry chuckled, lifting his head from Jeremy's. This motion brought us face to face, eye to eye. Our breaths mingled and my lips tingled. "What do you want now?" "To be close to you and Jeremy. We only have each other. It makes sense for us to be close." He was making a lot of sense. If I landed any of the jobs I applied for, I would need an extra pair of hands. What better hands than family? "What do you do for work?" "I'm a financial advisor. I work from home." I bit my lip, wondering if I would regret my decision. "Will you be able to look after Jeremy during the day?" "Definitely." "Okay, I'll get you another pie then." Harry finally took a step back. "I'll be waiting." A few days later. By Wednesday, one of the jobs I applied for got back to me. I could start as soon as possible. I took it personally. I needed money as soon as possible too. Rent, food, utilities, all of these needed to be paid. As Claire's next of kin, a fair share of her assets came to me legally, but I couldn't bring myself to touch it. Jeremy would start school in a few years, and all that money belonged to him, not me. I leeched off Claire all my life. It was my time to give back in my own little way. I dropped Jeremy off at Harry's with a few instructions here and there before going to work. Data Analyst Intern, my new title at JH Financials. First days sucked. Mine sucked harder than a high-power vacuum cleaner. Turns out that I wasn't the only intern hire. We were two. And at the end of 3-month probation, only one of us would be hired permanently. My opponent came in the form of a hazel-eyed brunette named Dave, with a height advantage of 6 foot. He unsurprisingly towered over me. "You're the pity hire. I heard your sister passed away recently." Dave smiled and looked very sinister, arranging his side of the table. I kept my head down, refusing to grace him with a reply, although I was crazy curious. How did he know about my sister? Regardless, I got into work mode, reviewing the files given to us. "Mr. Oakley will be expecting this before the close of work. Please work on your part," I advised, noticing his still frame from the corner of my eye. Dave scowled, but pulled out the files. We continued to work in silence until the close of work. My palms itched with excitement. I missed home. I missed Jeremy. I just wanted to hug and kiss his soft skin. My walk to the car turned into a fast drive back home. I tapped my foot impatiently in the elevator. I let in a breath of relief as the elevator doors dinged open. My sigh of relief soon morphed into dread as a shriek carried through the entire floor. I jumped out of the elevator and scurried towards Harry's apartment. His door opened without resistance. He didn't even lock the door. What if I was an intruder? Inside the living room was shirtless Harry shaking a milk bottle. Jeremy's cries were coming from the guest room. What did you do to him? I yelled, rushing for his diaper bag. Blue passy. He needs his pacifier. I just found it when Harry came striding down the hallway, passing the kitchen for the guest bedroom. He emerged moments later with Jeremy in his arms. I can take him, I said. He needs his passy. He needs his bottle, actually. He stole the passy from my hand regardless and walked to the couch, settling down with the baby. Oh, that's why he was crying. Did he just wake up from a nap? Yeah. I curled up on the other end of the couch, tucking my tired legs beneath me. Jeremy went quiet immediately. The nipple of the bottle disappeared between his tiny lips. He was just hungry. Why did I automatically assume the worst of Harry? To be honest, Harry was also trying his best. I leaned my head against my clenched fist for support and watched them. This was a good day, I whispered. Top 5. Harry gave me a sarcastic glance. Yelling at me made you that happy? No, I protested weakly. Not that. I got a job. Jeremy is happy. I'm finally finding a new balance. After what happened, I thought life would never feel normal again. Harry went quiet, frowning at my words. Me too. Anyways, tell me about your top 5. I closed my eyes, as if reliving the moment again. The day Claire came to pick me up from the orphanage. The orphanage? Harry asked, shocked. Yep, I nodded. Peter didn't tell you? Claire and I lost our parents very young, so we spent our childhood in the system. Peter and I, Harry paused, chasing his words carefully. We had a complicated relationship. I can tell. Harry rolled his eyes and gently bounced Jeremy on his knees to aid digestion. His exposed muscles flexed with each bounce and my lips went dry. Claire got out first? Yep, the orphanage lets you go when you turn 18. She worked tooth and nail to afford a life for me. Just when I thought she'd forgotten about me, she returned. Hey, don't cry, he glanced down at Jeremy. What about the other days in your top 5? My second best day was the day I graduated from college. I partied hard with friends, I had plans to get a really good job and spend all my money on Claire. The memory of that night wasn't as bright as it had been. I hadn't spoken to any of those friends in months. We drifted apart, each of us busy with fledgling careers, friends who weren't really friends. I still liked their photos on Instagram. They sent the occasional text to check in, but our lives had gone in different directions. It must be nice having parents to fall back on for comfort, I snidely commented, unable to hold back my bitterness. Harry laughed loudly, green eyes wrinkling at the sides. Peter really didn't say much about me, did he? Not exactly. Jeremy babbled softly, arms tilting towards me. He wanted me to hold him. Harry slapped his bum softly with a betrayed frown. After all the good times we shared. Finally, I whispered, pulling Jeremy to my chest. It felt like home. I missed you, baby. He missed you too. Harry finally pulled a shirt over his deliciously naked torso. My relationship with my parents is complicated. I came out to them when I turned 18, and they disowned me. My jaw fell open as I interrupted. What? You're gay? I've had more than a decade to reconsider. I'm pretty sure I'm gay, but my parents couldn't accept it. They disowned me, their picture-perfect son. Perfect is a strong word, I scowled, annoyed by his narcissism. He patted my head in response, taking a seat next to me again. Peter hated me for letting them down. They went harder on him because I failed them. They wanted to ensure that nothing went wrong with the second one. Wow, I'm sorry, I apologized. I never had to deal with parental judgment, and Claire was accepting. She would have accepted me even if I was a worm. No wonder Peter hated me. Harry raised an eyebrow in disbelief. He did? Why? I'm not the most manly man in the world, and he could have $1 million that I'm into men. Excuse me? Harry queried, confused by my metaphor. Jeremy's eyes were starting to close. He was sleepy. I shifted him to my shoulder, tapping his back in rhythmic motions. I'm as feminine as they come. That's probably why Peter didn't like me. Harry's mouth rounded into an O of realization. It's fine. I like you. I coughed and spluttered. Excuse you? Put Jeremy to bed and get some rest. I'll make you dinner. I walked out of Harry's apartment on stiff legs. What did he mean by the sudden but stupid confession? 2 weeks later, as I trudged down the hallway of JH Financials, my shoes squeaking with every step, I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. Today was the day Dave would get what he wanted, a chance to see me fall flat on my face in front of the higher-ups, and boy was he relishing in it. But let me back up a bit. Dave and I, we weren't exactly best buddies. He had this knack for getting under my skin like a pesky mosquito buzzing around on a hot summer night. And the worst part, according to office gossip, he had some sort of connection to the CEO, which meant I had to tread carefully. So, when Mr. Oakley summoned both of us to his office, I knew I was in for a rough ride. And boy was I right. Turns out, half of the files were submitted had been analyzed wrong. Now, I'm no Sherlock Holmes, but I sure as heck knew I wasn't the one responsible for those blunders. But Dave, he was quick to throw me under the bus, grinning like a Cheshire cat the whole time. The manager's scolding felt like daggers to my already bruised ego. I wanted to defend myself, to shout from the rooftops that it wasn't my fault, but the words caught in my throat, choked by the weight of his disappointment. You're both new hires, but the quality of your work is vastly different, he scolded. As I stumbled out of Mr. Oakley's office, tail tucked firmly between my legs, Dave sauntered up with that smug grin plastered on his face. Tough break, Victor. Looks like your days here are numbered. I clenched my fist, fighting the urge to punch that grin right off his face. Instead, I plastered on a fake smile and muttered, Karma is a real witch, and it'll sock you right in the jaw. With a heavy heart, I trudged back home, my shoulders slumped with defeat. But as I fumbled with the lock to my apartment, a voice called out from the other side. Hey Victor, come in! Dinner's ready! I hesitated for a moment, torn between wallowing in self-pity and seeking solace in Harry's company. For the past weeks, he'd been cooking me dinner to fatten me up in his own words. In the end, my growling stomach made the decision for me, and I found myself shuffling into his apartment like a lost puppy. Harry was at the stove, stirring something in a pot that smelled heavenly. He looked up when he saw me, a concerned frown marring his handsome features. Hey Victor, rough day? I let out a humorless chuckle, collapsing into a chair at the kitchen table. You could say that. Turns out Dave's been playing dirty, trying to get me kicked out of the company. Harry's eyes flashed with anger, his jaw clenching in a way that made my heart skip a beat. That son of a gun. Don't worry, Victor, he won't bother you again. I felt a rush of warmth spread through me at his words, a sense of comfort washing over me like a warm blanket on a cold winter's night. And then, before I could stop myself, I leaned up on my tippy toes and pressed my lips to his. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of our breath mingling, the taste of him on my lips, and then just as quickly as it had begun, it was over. Harry pulled away, his eyes wide with shock. Then, to my surprise, he smiled, a genuine heart-stopping smile that made my stomach flip-flop like a fish out of water. Dinner's ready, he said, gesturing towards the table. I kissed him! I actually kissed him! Did I like him? Peter's $1 million would have multiplied if he had placed that bet, I muttered, referencing the joke I made earlier about his suspicions. We settled at the table, the aroma of his cooking filling the air like a soothing balm. I couldn't help but feel a sense of hope blossoming inside me. Maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay after all. 3 months later, Harry and I had become friends that kissed often. At his place, at mine, in the kitchen, while he cooked, in the elevator after grocery shopping. It sent thrills through me, but it scared me at the same time. I wasn't sure if I liked him or if I just turned him into a solid rock of some sorts. There was no label, we just enjoyed each other's company. On a brighter note, Jeremy started crawling. Not full-on crawling, but he was getting into form. Harry's gallery was stocked full of pictures of Jeremy doing the bare minimum. His gallery also included photos of me. I giggled at the thought, trying to release some tension. Today marked the end of my internship, and the final decision would be made today. Dave had tried to screw me over with little tricks, but I was a step ahead. Also, he never tried something as major as last time. Dave was oddly on point. He never tried crazy stuff again, but he still gave me the stink eye, just like he was giving me now as we waited for Mr. Oakley. "I hope you've started looking for other jobs," he sneered. I folded my hands in front of me. "Nope, why would I?" "Good morning, gentlemen," Mr. Oakley greeted with a chirpy smile. I straightened my back instinctively. "Good morning, sir." "I had a talk with HR and we've made a decision. The person that'll be retained for the data analyst position is..." My breath caught in my throat. He gave a warm smile. "Victor." "What?" Dave exclaimed, eyeballs widening with shock. "Why is it him?" The manager's smile fell off as he leaned back into his chair. "Dave, do you think I'm stupid?" "Sir, of course not." I stifled a chuckle. "This isn't high school, and your petty games won't work here. You trying to discredit your coworker won't work either," Mr. Oakley pointed out sternly. He wasn't buying Dave's bullshit. Realizing his position, Dave apologized. "I'm sorry, sir." "I don't need your apology. Clear your desk." Dave and I exited the office after that order. I wanted to arrange my stuff better with the now free space on the desk. I sauntered up to Dave with the same grin he gave me 3 months ago. "Tough break, Dave. Looks like your days here are numbered. To 0. "Buzz off," he growled, ears flaming red. I giggled and moved my stack of files to the middle of the table. I narrowly avoided getting hit by the rope of his lanyard. "Careful, Tiger. Watch the door on your way out." Dave didn't grace me with a response. Instead, he stormed out. Mr. Oakley deserved some appreciation, so I straightened my shirt and headed back to his office. I stopped in my tracks at his doorway as I heard a familiar name. "Don't worry, Mr. Harry. Nobody will bully him. He belongs to the boss after all," Mr. Oakley chuckled politely. I wasn't stupid. It could only be one Harry. To hell with his financial advisor bullshit. He owned JH. Without caring about work hours, I stormed back to the apartment. I felt betrayed. It was my fault, to be honest. I barely knew him, yet I trusted him blindly. I stepped onto our floor, the 3rd floor. Each time I stepped out here for the past few weeks, I felt at home. I knew the moment I touched my door, Harry would hear and ask me to come over for dinner. His apartment would smell like spices and baby powder, and I'd totally lose all my tension on his couch. But now, I stood in front of those same doors, and my ears buzzed with anger. I rested my hand on the doorknob to calm myself down, but the door squeaked open immediately. He didn't even lock the door as usual. I knew him, but at the same time, apparently, I didn't know him at all. Again, as I walked in, I could hear the strains of Harry talking over the phone. Was it still Mr. Oakley? "That amount is insane. Are you even confident I can take custody of Jeremy?" Harry asked, arranging slices of cheese over a semi-cooked lasagna. Baby toys were scattered at his feet, and a pink apron covered his naked torso. He looked warm, but his words were cold. "How dare you!" I screamed, shocked by the pitch of my voice. Harry froze, dropping his phone right into the lasagna pan. "Babe, you're home early." I rolled my eyes. That's what he had to say? "You're trying to take Jeremy? Where is he?" I started searching frantically. "Is he in his room?" "Hey, calm down, it's not what you think." I evaded his attempts to pull me into a hug. "Then what is it?" Harry sighed, running a hand through his hair, leaving streaks of tomato sauce behind. "Look, Victor, let me explain." I crossed my arms over my chest, my heart pounding in my ears. "Explain what? That you're trying to take Jeremy away from me?" Harry's expression softened, his eyes pleading with me to understand. "It's not like that, Victor, I promise." "Then what is it like?" I demanded, my voice cracking with emotion. "Why were you talking about custody, and who were you talking to?" Harry took a step closer, his hands held up in a gesture of surrender. I was talking to my lawyer about the inheritance. I blinked, confusion clouding my mind. The inheritance? Harry nodded, his gaze never leaving mine. Your sister's inheritance. Jeremy's inheritance. I felt like the ground had gotten pulled out from under me, leaving me floating in a sea of uncertainty. What does that have to do with custody? Harry took a deep breath, his shoulders sagging with the weight of his words. Victor, I'm not trying to take Jeremy away from you. I would never do that. Then why were you talking about custody? I pressed, my voice trembling with fear. It's a lawyer I tried to hire a few months ago, but he was booked and busy, Harry said softly, his eyes pleading with me to understand. His schedule is open now, and he wanted to know if I'm still interested. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with meaning. Was he interested? I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me, leaving me gasping for air. You still want to take me to court? Harry shook his head, almost disgusted by the accusation. Of course not. Worst case scenario, we'll get married and we'll adopt him. I felt a tear slip down my cheek, hot and wet against my skin. Married? Adoption? Why? Because I love him, Victor, Harry said, his voice barely above a whisper. And he's my family. You're my family, and I love you too. I blinked, disbelief washing over me like a tidal wave. Family was a concept that only applied to Claire and me. You love me? Harry nodded, his eyes shining with unshed tears. Yes, I love you, Victor. I love you more than anything in this world. With you, I feel accepted. I feel loved. I feel home. I cautioned my stupid heart that threatened to fly out of my chest and into Harry's chiseled arms. I still had a bone to pick with him. That's great and all, but can you explain to home why you lied about your job? Are you the reason I got the job at JH? Harry placed the lasagna into the oven and turned to me. Babe. I took several steps back. Don't call me that. The only involvement I had in your employment was ensuring Dave got what he deserved. I didn't even know you were working for JH until you mentioned it randomly. Harry was probably telling the truth. He rarely went into the office in the first place. The ball in my stomach loosened and I relented. About the job, please don't get involved again. Ever, I sternly insisted, pointing my finger at his nose. He raised his hands up in surrender. I swear. And about Jeremy, let's see how it goes. We're just starting out as a couple and you didn't even ask me out. I don't even know if we're dating. Adopting him is a long journey. I analyzed, pointing out the fact that we weren't even dating. Harry nodded in understanding but paused at my statement about dating. Wait, we weren't dating all this while? Of course not, I hissed, flabbergasted. You can't skip due process just because I'm a man. I want the flowers and candles too. I'm sorry I skipped that part, Harry whispered, placing a warm kiss on my lips. His teeth lightly grazed my tongue as he pulled me closer and I went pliant in his arms. He kept secrets, but I was glad he was still my Harry. Everything was fine as long as he remained here with me, with us. Our moment was interrupted by a familiar shriek from the guest room turned nursery. Harry pulled back, eyes hooded with desire. I'll get him. You can take a shower and get changed. I placed a final kiss on his lips before he ran down the hallway. I'm coming, Jerry. I'm coming. Before disappearing into the hallway, he turned back. I'll give you everything you want, as long as it's not you leaving me. I'll give you even the moon. I rolled my eyes at his childish promises, but my heart pounded crazily at his words, and my belly erupted with a crowd of butterflies. Stupid man. It's not like I'll ask for the moon. I'll settle for a few stars. 6 months later. Harry was a man of his words. I got the flowers and the candles along with a crowd of cheering onlookers that had me blushing. This idiot chose to have the proposal in a glass-walled restaurant. I found my pictures on several blogs the next day. He was smug about it and it annoyed me. I even got teased at work, but that was 5 months ago. Now, I found my new normal again. Change was annoyingly constant, and Jeremy was the perfect evidence. The crawling baby was turning 1 today. I bounced him on my knee, adjusting the bow tie on his neck even though I couldn't see it. Harry had placed a blindfold over my eyes under the guise of a birthday surprise. "It's not even my birthday," I protested. "That doesn't mean you won't get a surprise." Harry's soft lips met mine, and I returned it for a mere second before pulling back. "Not in front of the child." Finally, the car stopped, and he helped me out. I hoisted Jeremy into my arms, and he started to babble.
Haas house.
"Haas?" I mumbled after him, trying to guess what he was seeing. "Are you ready?" Harry asked. Moving to my back, his hands deftly moved around the blindfold. It wasn't his first time taking one off of me, although the circumstances were vastly different. I nodded to show agreement. "Yep, take it off." The blindfold fell off and I blinked a couple of times to adjust my corneas to the light. With each blink, the view of the blue house and white picket fence came into view. Claire and Peter's house. My heart dropped and my face went pale. No! Harry stood behind me, holding me in place. The only reason Peter and Claire bought this house is because they wanted Jeremy to be raised here. The classic American dream house. He was right. It was all Claire wished for when we lived in the orphanage. A blue house, square windows, a nice backyard, big lawn, and a white picket fence. We couldn't have that, so she built her dream for Jeremy. "You're such a jerk for setting this up behind my back," I scolded, but the smile on my lips said otherwise. Living here would reopen old wounds, but it would also help with the healing. Grief was just love with nowhere to go. Thankfully, Claire left me, Jeremy, and in turn, Harry. My love had an outlet. "Yazy!" Jeremy babbled, pointing at a patch of daisies along the fence. I turned to Harry. "Your picture books aren't that useless after all." "I told you so," Harry retorted smugly and placed Jeremy on the ground. With shaky steps, Jeremy walked over to the daisies and grabbed a handful. I wasn't surprised by his grip. Baby grip strength was crazy strong. Ask the bald patch on Harry's nape. Like I expected also, Jeremy delivered the fistful of daisies to his tiny mouth. Both of us lunged over in horror. "No!" Contact with Harry's parents had been minimal the past year. Efforts to get them to be cordial to Harry and Jeremy only worsened when they found out about our relationship. I suspected that the distance would become permanent, but that was okay too. We didn't need that family. We were building our own, and I'd be overprotective every step of the way, over Jeremy and definitely over Harry. The end. Can you start a relationship based on mutual grief? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.